Dear students, dear Irish Lit class, this is by way of a fare thee well, and I hope an au revoir. I do hope that some of you will come and join my summer class. I can't see why they should limit the numbers, or either of my fall classes. Surely there should be as many as can face this virtual learning setup. I ought to explain, occasionally I catch sight of my hair. It's the hair there flying, and you must think, what is happening with his hair? I have a fan just over there, which is, I love air that moves. Air that doesn't move gets to me and makes me feel claustrophobic. And it's hot today, 79 degrees out here, astonishing. So that's why I look more like a distracted wizard than usual. But I am focused on your task in your final of saying briefly what it is that our syllabus has taught you about Ireland, Irish culture. You can see that it's an enormous thing. Culture in Ireland, they all seem to be poets. Poets, drunkards, like Captain Boyle, dreamers, we've got a lot of dreamers in there, Christy Mahan, plenty of dreamers in Juno. And so Ireland, land of dreamers and poets and drunks. I guess that kind of sums it up. I lived there for a good while. My wife is Irish, and we lived in Dublin for many years. So I know firsthand what the Irish soul is like, and based on that I chose the books that you might read. Obviously the one that we really devoted ourselves to is The Secret Scripture, which for me has a very special place in my heart. And as one of you wrote, in the sort of what's it about last question, 100 Years of Ireland. That's exactly right. That's what it's about. And you glimpse the terrible battles and revenges and cruelties and crazinesses and the grotesque narrow-mindedness of the Catholic Church, which has eased somewhat. I don't want you to think of Ireland as this place ruled by vicious bigots. They were actually well ahead of many other countries in recognizing same-sex marriage, and recognizing gay rights. Amazingly, they turned from being this narrow-minded little collection of prejudiced people to being a country that welcomed freedom. It's a wonderful thing. So it's no longer the tyrannized place it was. However, literature about modern Ireland, this was I think a modern Irish literature class, is bound to take in the period when the Catholic Church continued to have a malign influence. Thinking it doing good, I guess, with the things that were done to poor Roseanne in The Secret Scripture, I'm not sure that you can quite believe that the priests wish the best for their parishioners. It's not clear whether they do or not. It can twist you to be a priest and be without your own little family. It's a very odd choice on the part of the Catholic Church to place the priests in a position where they're supposed to be advisors to the married, but not allowed to know firsthand what they're talking about. In doing so, they put themselves in a specialized position. They don't have the prejudices that come from being married and might distort their view of marriage based on their own experiences. Since they have no experience, they're completely unprejudiced. But this is not necessarily the solution to good judgment, to know nothing about it. Sometimes it's good, but often not. So the Church is there, and we see her, Mother Church, in all kinds of situations. To begin with, we had two great writers, Joyce and Beckett, who fled Ireland, fled the Ireland that expected of them to mourn their relatives dying in the church, that's to say, in the shadow of the church. And they find it impossible to respect people who embraced the absurdity of God and godliness. This doesn't mean they were not spiritual in any way. They were deeply spiritual, but the church itself is sometimes ungodly and not necessarily the place where your spirituality is best reflected. So Joyce and Beckett abandoned Ireland, and yet it never abandoned them. It haunted their dreams, their language. It's curious. Its form in Beckett is the most interesting because his plays, although they are very carefully placed in nowhere land as the characters are, their bizarre names, Ireland constantly arrives in the play in various different ways, but cannot be excluded. We write out of our dreams, or we can't write at all. And so in come Irish visions of Ireland, which possessed Beckett all the way to the end. Joyce, actually less so, but he did this extraordinary thing in his long, long novel Ulysses, that he devoted it to a day in the city of Dublin, the very day on which his wife-to-be initiated him into manhood. She made a man of me, says Joyce. That day. And he took that day and built to it a memorial the like of which no day of initiation has ever had. It's very nice that you honor your wife-to-be, and you honor your wife by dedicating a monstrous tome to the day on which she released you from virginity. It's a great thing that the book is. This immense and quite difficult book. Nonetheless, it's a book you can scale without too much hardship, which is more than you can say for Finnegan's Wake. And it's a book, Finnegan's Wake too, entirely about Ireland. So he left Ireland only to actually write about Ireland and nothing but Ireland. Whereas Beckett left and found himself writing about a kind of strange mixture of Ireland and France, his adopted country. And by writing in French, he also entered Ireland by a kind of back door, the back door of another language, which eventually becomes scrubbed and cleaned into nice Irish English by Beckett himself and various hands. Joyce, on the other hand, made an immense study, like a giant map that would cover, 100-foot high walls, made that map in a language, not entirely the language of Ireland, although Ulysses has a great deal of Irish speech in it, but ultimately in Finnegan's Wake, in a universal language, in the language of night, language of dreams, the night world of which Ulysses was the day world, investigating the Ireland he had left, turning it into this gigantic mythic landscape compared to which the walls of Troy, the city of Troy, and the whole of the Iliad are rather small beer. So here is this extraordinary act of devoting your life to the minutiae, partly invented and partly remembered, as Joyce used to write to people saying, when you turn the corner of this street, what do you see directly opposite? When maps weren't enough. You devote your life to the minutiae of the past. Dublin as it was on that day, not Dublin as it was by the time he was writing his book about it. An attempt to freeze time and place, and that as a writer's enterprise is a very interesting thing, not necessarily an Irish thing, but what it says is we couldn't get away from Ireland. Physically, to remove oneself is nothing. Different sky, same feelings. So there we read a lot of that strange journey, circular journey which returns itself to Ireland. We read the secret scripture which tells you again how Ireland, like the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail, ends up with the main characters being mother and son, which they never knew. In that sense, completing the snake circle, as Joyce and Beckett do by returning to Ireland compulsively, the snake that eats its tail. And then we ended up with two wonderful plays, Playboy of the Western World, which both pokes fun at the dreamer that is Ireland, and shows the dreamer to be, in fact, Christie is a dreamer, but he's a liar. And yet, with a little twist of fortune, he can dance out the door with the dad he hated enough to try to kill, and become happy if we believe that is really an option for him in the future. So there's Ireland. There's Ireland, the poet, as Christie discovers himself to be in his love talk. There's also Ireland, the delusional, the deluded, in Darling, Peggy, Mike, and in the villagers who take Christie Mann to their bosom in delight, as at this very moment the actor Matt Damon is being taken to the bosom of Dalkey, a little town just south of Dublin, where he's stranded because in the middle of making a movie up came COVID and froze him in place. And they love him there. They adore him. They protect him from the stupid journalists, and he loves it, and they love him. And Christie was like that. He arrived. He wasn't a movie star, but he was. He was the nearest thing to a movie star that they could ever have. A man who killed his father, absolutely. But it was all a lie, a fantasy. That's a vision of Ireland you get. And you see something of the same in Juno. Captain Boyle is a dreamer. At the end, he barely even notices that all his furniture is gone. He's in an empty room. There's nothing left. And the world, the whole world, is in a state of chassis. A state of chassis. So he can see that much, that chaos has come. But his life is ruled entirely by dreams, and Juno is the only practical member of the family, and without her there would be none. And now she's gone. So who knows what's in store for Joxer and the captain. Just becoming drunks, becoming neighborhood drunks, sleeping in the street most likely. They'll be chucked out of that apartment. Without Juno to regulate the household, it's a terrible vision of the future. But it's written in love, in anger and in love. O'Casey loved Ireland, and he's trying to wake Ireland to its own dreamy, drunken stupidity and fecklessness. And there are revolutions to join always through the literature that we've been reading. Modern Ireland is a matter of forging contemporary Ireland. Contemporary Ireland is pretty impressive, despite the battles in the north and the IRA. They're doing pretty well. They are a modern nation. They've emerged from the toils that you read about in our syllabus. So I wish you well with that. I'm going to enjoy it, whatever you write, and I enjoyed our semester extraordinarily much, despite the desperate dislocation of it, despite the awful distress of what many of you, most of you have gone through. For me, there's been a reaching out through these virtual means. I felt your presence very strongly. Thank you for that, and please let me see you again, whether it's virtually or better still, in reality. Thank you. Please keep safe. All the very best. Bye.